Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. President Donald Trump delivers a speech to a joint session of Congress 6 weeks into his second administration. Expected to talk about the economy, government spending, border security, the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, his executive orders, and the rest of his agenda. President Trump's tariffs on goods from Mexico, Canada, and China take effect, and those countries announce retaliatory tariffs. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying that President Trump is a smart guy, but the tariffs are a very dumb thing to do. Supreme Court hears a case about a lawsuit filed by Mexico against U.S. gun manufacturers claiming they are responsible for arming Mexico's drug cartels and the resulting violence epidemic. Vice President JD Vance defends President Trump's pause on U.S. military aid to Ukraine. The two astronauts stuck in space for 9 months are asked about how they became embroiled in presidential campaign politics. And on this Mardi Gras holiday, the House Majority Leader Steve Scalise from Louisiana brings king cake for everybody to his news conference. Story from ABC News. Donald Trump, 6 weeks into a historic comeback to the White House on Tuesday, heads to Capitol Hill to address Congress and the nation as a reinvented president relentlessly testing the limits of executive power. Trump will step up to the dais at 9 p.m. Eastern to lay out his goals for the next 4 years and tout the actions he's taken so far, many of them challenging constitutional restraints on his authority versus Congress and the courts. The theme of his address will be the renewal of the American dream, a White House official told ABC News. Trump will focus, the official said, on his record thus far, the economy, border security, and what the official called the president's plans for peace around the globe. That was from ABC News. C-SPAN's live coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern with a preview of the speech. The president's speech is at 9 p.m. Eastern. That'll be followed by the Democratic response from Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan. And after that, we'll take your phone calls and get your reaction on social media on the C-SPAN networks. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference today, talked about what he expected to hear from the president.
President Trump makes his triumphant return, of course, tonight, as was mentioned. It's 5 years after his last State of the Union address. This is a joint address to Congress, not a State of the Union, because a State of the Union is typically delivered on or around the sort of the 1 year anniversary, first year in office. But this president is working so quickly, I invited him to come early in the process to give this joint address because there's so much to report to the people, and we're delighted he's going to be there. If he just stood at the Speaker's rostrum and read off all his list of accomplishments since January 20th, we'd be there all night. I don't expect it will go that long. He's going to give a truncated version of this. But there really is so much to celebrate. The president has already notched impressive lists of wins in so many categories. There's a few. Securing the border so well that border crossings have hit an historic low. Deporting criminal illegal aliens. Taking on the cartels directly. Standing up to terrorists. Bringing hostages back home. Working to secure peace around the globe. Ending the weaponization of government, bringing investments and jobs back to the U.S., unleashing American energy, keeping men out of women's sports that the Democrats don't seem to agree with us on, and cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, all this has been happening in just 43 days. It's hard to believe. He's just been in office 43 days, and that's just one sample list of what's been accomplished. It is, as our whip said, promises made, promises kept, and we're going to keep that going, and he's just getting started. So we look forward to hearing more about his vision for the future tonight, and we will continue to work with him hand in hand to deliver and implement the America First agenda and renew the American dream, which is what will be the subject of his discussion tonight.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference with other House Republican leaders. Story from Axios. A Democratic boycott is developing ahead of President Trump's address to Congress on Tuesday. Axios has learned Democratic leaders have asked lawmakers to show up to the speech with people affected by DOGE and Trump's federal funding freeze. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State, one of the most senior Democrats in the Senate, will not attend Trump's speech on Tuesday, Axios has learned. Neither will Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, who will instead host an online town hall. On the House side, Congresswoman Becca Balint, Democrat of Vermont, told Axios she does not plan to attend and will instead participate in a Move On live stream with Senate Democrats. Congressman Greg Casar, Democrat of Texas, chairs the Progressive Caucus. He spoke about the president's speech at a news conference today.
Tonight, millions of Americans will tune in to watch the president address a joint session of Congress. I do not know what Trump will say, but I can guarantee you that he is going to lie to the American people and not tell them the truth about what MAGA Republicans in Congress want to do to you right now. So let me say it clearly. Whatever political games that Donald Trump plays tonight, whatever lies he tells and whatever show he puts on, people watching at home should know that Trump and House Republicans want to steal your health care, steal your taxpayer money, and hand it over to their billionaire buddies and to their donors. In Congress, Republicans are advancing a budget that would end Medicaid as we know it. And Elon Musk is trying to cut your Medicare and your Social Security. Social Security that seniors earned throughout their lifetime is what Elon Musk just recently called a quote-unquote Ponzi scheme. I'll say it again. Elon Musk just called Social Security, quote, the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time, end quote. That's right. A guy that makes $8 million per day from federal government contracts thinks that seniors getting $65 a day from Social Security is a quote-unquote Ponzi scheme. Their plan is plain and simple. Guys like Elon Musk get richer, and you get screwed. But here's the good news. Democrats are united and fighting back to protect your Social Security, your Medicare, and your Medicaid.
Congressman Greg Casar, Democrat of Texas, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, at a news conference with other House Democrats today. Politico writes that Congressman Jim Jordan and Congressman James Comer, the chairs of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees respectively, are bringing two IRS whistleblowers who disclosed tax information about Hunter Biden to President Trump's joint address to Congress Tuesday evening. Their decision to invite Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler as their guests underscores how Republican scrutiny of the Biden family could continue on Capitol Hill long after President Joe Biden has left the White House. That was from Politico. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was on Fox News Channel today talking about the guests that President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump will be bringing.
The First Lady will have a big roster, including Stephanie Diller.
Yes.
And that is one of the themes. People, law enforcement whose spouses lost their lives in the line of duty.
Yeah, the First Lady will be in attendance tonight, and the guest list that she put together and President Trump put together is phenomenal. There will be everyday American heroes in attendance. Stephanie Diller, whom you mentioned, who lost her husband in the line of duty at the hands of an illegal immigrant. You have Mark Fogel, who, of course, because of President Trump's Peace Through Strength efforts, returned from Russian captivity. Corey Comparator, who lost his life protecting his family in Butler, Pennsylvania. You'll also have an auto worker. You'll have a steel worker, and you will see exceptional Americans with great stories. President Trump will be telling their stories.
Right. I know you mentioned Elon Musk will be there.
Yes.
Staff advisors will be there. The secretaries will be there. You also mentioned there's special guests. Mm-hmm. And you gave me the idea that perhaps you might weaken and tell me who those surprise guests are. Have you decided if you're going to tell me?
I have decided I am not going to tell you. I will let President Trump tell the country later. But there are going to be some very special guests that the president will reveal in his speech. And I also want to mention there will be the mothers of Jocelyn Nungare and Laken Riley, who will be in attendance tonight, who, of course, lost their daughters at the hands of illegal migrant immigrants. And that's what part of the reason President Trump is working so hard on these deportations and why Congress and Democrats need to get on board with this effort, because the vast majority of Americans are supportive of it.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt interviewed on Fox News Channel. Congressman Brad Schneider, Democrat from Illinois, chair of the New Democrat Coalition, said today at a news conference on Capitol Hill that his guest at the president's speech tonight will be a veteran who lost his job as a federal employee.
President Trump and congressional Republicans are doing everything they can to give a free ride to oligarchs like Elon Musk and his wealthy billionaire friends. And they're putting the burden for all of this on our seniors, our children, our first responders, on people who educate our children, build our houses, work on the factory floor, who take care of our communities and tend to us when we are sick. It is these hardworking people who are on the crosshairs of the Republicans' actions. One of these people is my guest tonight. Adam Mulvey is a 20-year Army veteran who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and in Iraq, and 1 in Afghanistan. He's one of 6,000 of these veterans we talked about who was fired between February 13th and 24th. He worked at Lovell Federal Health Care Center. James A. Lovell Center is the only hospital in our country that serves both veterans and active military and every one of those recruits I just mentioned. His job was to help provide emergency management services, planning and preparing in the case of a tornado or another emergency or even an active shooter. He served 35,000 veterans in our area, tens of thousands of active duty sailors and other military members, and the 40 to 50,000 people each year who go through Naval Station Great Lakes. We all believe government should be efficient, but Trump and Musk are taking a sledgehammer to Americans' lives and our livelihoods. And I am proud to stand with all of my colleagues here today saying it has to stop.
Congressman Brad Schneider, Democrat from Illinois, chair of the New Democrat Coalition, at a news conference today. The impact of the DOGE spending cuts on veterans also came up as Alina Habba, counselor to the president, spoke with reporters in the White House driveway. The NBC News headline, Trump advisor Alina Habba says veterans fired by DOGE are perhaps not fit to have a job at the moment.
Yeah.
The Democrats are expected to bring a number of federal workers.
Yes.
Tonight.
Yes.
Some of them are veterans who
Yeah.
have been let go.
Okay.
Is the president starting to think about maybe some of those veterans who worked for the federal government and maybe what the administration can do to at least help salvage their lives?
Well, as you know, we care about veterans tremendously. I mean, that's something the president has always cared about. Anybody in blue, anybody that serves this country. But at the same time, we have taxpayer dollars. We have a fiscal responsibility to use taxpayer dollars to pay people that actually work. That doesn't mean that we forget our veterans by any means. We are going to care for them in the right way, but perhaps they're not fit to have a job at this moment or not willing to come to work. And we can't, I wouldn't take money from you and pay somebody and say, sorry, they're not going to come to work. It's just not acceptable.
Alina Habba, counselor to the president, with reporters in the White House driveway. Another story from Axios. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, is cracking down on plans among his members to try to disrupt or draw attention away from President Trump's speech to Congress on Tuesday evening. Many Democrats are facing a torrent of pressure from the grassroots base to stage more overt acts of resistance, but a good chunk of the party feels that too rowdy a display could backfire. That was from Axios. C-SPAN's live coverage of President Donald Trump's speech before a joint session of Congress starts at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight with a preview. The president's speech is at 9. That'll be followed by the Democratic response and then your reaction by phone and social media. On C-SPAN Radio, C-SPAN Television, streamed at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. And this is Washington Today. From Associated Press, President Donald Trump launched a trade war Tuesday against America's three biggest trading partners, drawing immediate retaliation from Mexico, Canada, and China, and sending financial markets into a tailspin as the U.S. faced the threat of rekindled inflation and paralyzing uncertainty for business. Just after midnight, Trump imposed 25% taxes or tariffs on Mexican and Canadian imports, though he limited the levy to 10% on Canadian energy. Trump also doubled the tariff he slapped last month on Chinese products to 20%. Reporting from Associated Press, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said on CNBC today that these tariffs are specifically targeting the fentanyl drug trade.
How much do you expect as far as a reaction to some of this stuff? And what is the president's and your tolerance for a dislocation, if you will, in the stock market?
Well, remember, the current tariff policy is a drug-related policy. There's opioids pouring into this country. They're killing about 75,000 autopsied Americans a year. So imagine if you lost, or I lost one of my children, the first thing I do is worry about an autopsy. So the president thinks there's multiples of that, people who've died, and there is no price for American death. So his view is we've got to protect American lives, and that's what these tariffs are about. So let's differentiate between today's tariffs, which are about saving Americans' lives. China makes the opioid products, and then Mexico and Canada feed them into America, and that's got to end. They've done a nice job on the border, but they haven't stopped the flow of fentanyl. And then if you want to talk about trade policy, that starts April 2nd, and that's a very, very clear reset that these countries have used us and abused us, and that is going to change. But that starts April 2nd, so let's keep the two separate, and I'm happy to talk about either way.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in a CNBC interview. More from the Associated Press article. Beijing retaliated with tariffs of up to 15% on a wide array of U.S. farm exports. It also expanded the number of U.S. companies subject to export controls and other restrictions by about 24. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country would plaster tariffs on more than $100 billion of American goods over the course of 21 days. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said Mexico will respond to the new taxes with its own retaliatory tariffs. Sheinbaum said she will announce the products Mexico will target on Sunday in a public event in Mexico City's Central Plaza, perhaps with a delay indicating Mexico still hopes to de-escalate the trade war set off by Trump. As he promised voters, the U.S. president is abandoning the free trade policies the United States pursued for decades after World War II. Trump argues that open trade cost America millions of factory jobs and that tariffs are the path to national prosperity. He rejects mainstream economists who contend that such protectionism is costly and inefficient. Reporting from Associated Press. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke about these tariffs and President Trump's speech tonight to a joint session of Congress today on the Senate floor.
Tonight, Donald Trump will address the nation before a joint session of Congress. This will be the 5th time Donald Trump speaks from the House chamber, and by now, the American people know just what to expect. They can expect Donald Trump to launch a deluge of mistruths and falsehoods. But tonight, we won't hear one peep from Donald Trump about his broken promise to bring inflation down on day one. We won't hear one syllable about how Donald Trump's policies are making inflation and the costs that average American families pay worse. So this morning, let's start here. Let's start about that here, starting with tariffs. Last night, for the first time in decades, the President of the United States imposed 25% tariffs on nearly all goods coming from Canada and Mexico. What does this mean for the American people? What do Donald Trump's tariffs mean for the American people? They're going to pay more. Everyday costs are about to become more expensive. It means, according to the CEO of Target, to take one example, consumers could see higher prices within days. This is not something 6 months out. That includes everything: price of gas, produce, cars, cheese, dairy products, coffee, even chocolate. American farmers are going to pay more, will pay more for fertilizer, which means food prices go up. New furniture will become more expensive as Canada is a major supplier of lumber. Refrigerators, washers, microwaves, laptops, smartphones, clothing, shoes, all will likely see increases. Hold on to your hat, Mr. and Mrs. America. When you bring it all together, the average U.S. household could see $2,000 in increased expenses a year. And that's a conservative estimate. Let me repeat that. The average American family, $2,000 more out of their pockets, their hard-earned dollars that they're struggling to stretch. And now another added increase, all that didn't have to happen because Donald Trump is imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor in Washington. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, at a news conference in Ottawa, announced retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods and said President Trump did a dumb thing.
Now I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. We signed a historic deal that has created record jobs and growth in both of our countries. We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the U.S. have done together for decades, for generations. And now we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see. And now, to my fellow Canadians, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs. We will take measures to prevent predatory behavior that threatens Canadian companies because of the impacts of this trade war, leaving them open to takeovers. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy. We will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day because this country is worth fighting for.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a news conference in Ottawa. President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social in all caps, "If companies move to the United States, there are no tariffs," 3 exclamation points. And then later, please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount. Prime Minister Trudeau was asked at his news conference whether he agrees with investor Warren Buffett that tariffs are a declaration of war.
Canadians are not angry at the American people for this. We don't have anything against Americans. Americans are our neighbors, our friends, our partners. We do things together. We've done things together for decades and generations. This is a policy decision by the American government designed to go after the Canadian economy. This is a trade war, yes. But Canadians are hurt. Canadians are angry. We're going to choose to not go on vacation in Florida or Old Orchard Beach or wherever. We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem. But let me tell Americans, we're not booing you. We're not booing your teams. We're not booing your players. We're booing a policy that is designed to hurt us.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, part of his news conference today in Ottawa. He also said about President Trump what he wants to see is a total collapse of the Canadian economy because that'll make it easier to annex us. We will never be the 51st state. When it comes to defending our great nation, there is no price we aren't willing to pay. CNN has a story. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said his Canadian province is responding to U.S. tariffs by banning American companies from local procurement deals and ripping up an agreement with SpaceX's Starlink to provide high-speed internet. Ford also threatened to apply a 25% surcharge on the electricity Ontario supplies to the U.S. if the tariffs persist. The United Auto Workers putting out a statement. For 40 years, we've seen the devastating effects of so-called free trade on the working class. Corporations have been driving a nonstop race to the bottom by killing good blue-collar jobs in America to go exploit some poor worker in another country by paying poverty wages. Tariffs are a powerful tool in the toolbox for undoing the injustice of anti-worker trade deals. We are glad to see an American president take aggressive action on ending the free trade disaster that has dropped like a bomb on the working class. That was part of the statement from United Auto Workers. And from NBC News, shoppers won't have to wait long to see President Trump's trade war ripple across store shelves, retail executives say. Target's CEO said Tuesday that the company could hike prices on fruits and vegetables in coming days in response to tariffs. And Best Buy's chief executive called price increases highly likely. Even Walmart, which has benefited from consumers' ongoing hunt for savings, recently warned that it's not going to be completely immune from federal import taxes on America's biggest trade partners. That was from NBC News. And Wall Street reaction to the tariffs, the Dow down 670, Nasdaq down 65, S&P down 71. Another story from NBC News, the Supreme Court on Tuesday appeared likely to rule against the Mexican government over a lawsuit seeking to hold U.S. gun makers accountable for an epidemic of violence that officials in Mexico say can be traced to their products. During oral arguments, both conservative and liberal justices seemed skeptical of the arguments made by Mexico that its claims could move forward despite a federal law intended to shield gun companies from liability. The case reached the court amid increased tensions between American and Mexican leaders following the election of President Donald Trump, who has sought to stem the flow of migrants across the U.S.-Mexico border, citing drug trafficking and gang violence. That was from NBC News. Here is part of the Supreme Court oral argument in the case Smith & Wesson v. Estados Unidos Mexicanos. Justice Amy Coney Barrett questioning Noel Francisco, a former U.S. Solicitor General and now the attorney for the U.S. gun companies.
So it seems to me, as Justice Thomas began, that when we're talking about the statute that was the violation at the beginning for the predicate, it has to be a statute that was specifically applicable to the sale or marketing of the product, the gun.
Yes.
Justice Sotomayor asked you, so that's the retailer selling it to the bad guy, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's where the proximate cause inquiry comes in. Your client, the theory, right? The theory is that your client under example 2, has aided and abetted as the manufacturer. Proximate cause doesn't appear in that portion of the statute. It's only in the predicate portion. So if we accept that framing of the theory, the framing of the complaint, we're really only asking about proximate cause, as Justice Gorsuch was asking you, between the retailer, the sale, and the harm ultimately caused to Mexico. And then we're looking at the chain of events that you're talking at right now. Sale to the bad guy, smuggled across the border, misuse.
So I think I have two responses, Your Honor. The first is I actually disagree with how you framed it, but the second is even if I accept how you framed it, I still think there's no proximate cause. The statute says that there has to be proximate cause between our violation and Mexico's injury. Our violation is not the illegal sale itself. It's the actions that we undertake to aid and abet it, the violative aiding and abetting conduct.
How does that fit in the statute, though?
Your Honor, because I think the statute says it's the statute requires that, sets forth the exception where a seller has knowingly violated an applicable statute and the violation, referring to the seller's violation.
But it's not just applicable statute, it's statute applicable to the sale or marketing of the product. So that seems to me to refer to a specific statute relating to this manufacture, sale, distribution of guns, not the aiding and abetting statute.
Well, I think it's got to refer to our violation. It refers back to the seller's violation. And here the seller hasn't specifically, and this maybe goes to the confusion that Justice Thomas pointed out, but the seller's violation is not the actual retail sale. We're not retail sellers.
Right.
The seller's violation here is the aiding and abetting of that retail sale. And I presume what they are invoking is the federal aiding and abetting statute, and they're trying to combine that with the actual specific sale. So I think there are all kinds of problems with their theory.
Part of the Supreme Court oral argument today, Justice Amy Coney Barrett questioning attorney Noel Francisco over whether Mexico can sue U.S. gun makers for drug cartel violence in Mexico. A little bit more from the NBC News article. In the 2021 lawsuit, the Mexican government accused Smith & Wesson, Colt, and other companies of deliberately selling guns to dealers who sell products that are often later recovered at crime scenes in Mexico. Seeking up to $10 billion in damages, the Mexican government accuses the companies of aiding and abetting violations of U.S. law, which means they are not protected by the federal immunity shield called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. But justice appeared skeptical on Tuesday that Mexico has adequately alleged that the gun companies should be held liable for specific dealers that sell firearms in bulk to straw producers whose intent is to traffic the guns across the border. That was from NBC News. Here's more from the oral argument. Kate Stetson, the attorney for the Mexican government, questioned by Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
You have the manufacturers aiding and abetting, in your theory, by producing guns that are singularly attractive to the cartel, because they're designed in a particular way that cartel members like, because they're showy. They're making erasable serial numbers, which obviously are attractive to criminals, because every criminal would like to erase the serial number if they can. So that's what you claim is aiding and abetting. But what are you claiming Interstate, the distributor wholesaler, did? Other than selling the product, they don't design it. They didn't do any of the, they didn't design it. They didn't have anything to do with that. They just have a product they're selling. So how do we make, how are your allegations enough with respect to Interstate? And if we were to say they're not enough with respect to Interstate, doesn't that break the causal connection with the manufacturers?
Justice Sotomayor, the complaint actually details 6 or 7 different examples of how the manufacturers are actively participating in the illegal market.
I'm
one of them is
accepting
design.
that.
Yes.
I'm asking, tell me what it says that the distributors are doing.
What it says the distributors are doing, including the one that's named in this complaint, are knowingly supplying the dealers who we know sell unlawfully across the border.
But knowledge is not enough. We have repeatedly said mere knowledge is not enough. You have to aid and abet in some way. You have to intend and take affirmative action to encourage what they're, not to encourage, but to participate in what they're doing.
What this court said in Rosemond is a person who actively participates in a criminal scheme, knowing its intent and character, intends that scheme's commission. That's the criminal aiding and abetting standard.
Yeah. Supreme Court oral argument in the case Smith & Wesson v. Estados Unidos Mexicanos. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor questioning attorney Kate Stetson representing the government of Mexico. You can find the full oral argument at our website at cspan.org. And CBS News reports the number of migrants crossing the U.S. southern border illegally in President Trump's first full month in office plunged to a level not seen in at least 25 years, according to preliminary government data obtained by CBS News. Last month, Border Patrol recorded about 8,450 apprehensions of migrants who crossed into the country unlawfully between official entry points along the U.S.-Mexico border, the statistics show. On some days, during a record spike in illegal crossings under the Biden administration, Border Patrol recorded more than 8,000 apprehensions in a single day. Again, from CBS News. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Tonight, watch C-SPAN's live coverage of President Trump's address to Congress, the first address of his second term, and less than 2 months since taking office. C-SPAN's live coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern with a preview of the evening from Capitol Hill, followed by the president's speech, which begins at 9 p.m. Eastern, and then watch the Democratic response after the president's speech. We'll also take your calls and get your reaction on social media. Over on C-SPAN 2, you can also watch a simulcast of the evening's coverage, followed by reaction from lawmakers live from Capitol Hill. Watch President Trump's address to Congress live tonight, beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, our simulcast live on C-SPAN 2, or on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app. Also online at cspan.org. C-SPAN, bringing you your democracy unfiltered.
And the president's speech will also be live here on C-SPAN Radio. Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more headlines from the Hill. The Office of Personnel Management on Tuesday updated its guidance to department heads that demanded the firing of federal workers, adding that it's up to the agency on whether to boot their hires. From Forbes, President Donald Trump has long made it no secret he wants to dismantle the Department of Education. Now newly confirmed Education Secretary Linda McMahon is treating that goal as the agency's historic final mission in an internal memo to staff. In the memo, which McMahon emailed to employees shortly after taking office, she outlines an urgent mandate from Trump to eliminate bureaucratic bloat at the department as a momentous final mission to be executed quickly and responsibly. And Senate Democrats blocked a bill Monday night that would have banned schools that get federal funding from allowing transgender athletes in girls and women's sports. The vote was 51 to 45, short of the 60 votes needed to limit debate and proceed to a final passage vote. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, writes the New York Times, on Tuesday offered a course of action that he said could end the war while trying to assure the Trump administration that his government was dedicated to peace. Mr. Zelensky wrote on X, "Our meeting in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to be. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right." Ukrainian leaders said he was ready to release Russian prisoners of war, stop long-range drone and missile strikes aimed at Russian targets, and declare a truce at sea immediately, moves that he said would help establish a pathway to peace. Only, however, if Russia will do the same, he added. That was from the New York Times. President Donald Trump on Monday night ordered a pause on shipments of U.S. military aid to Ukraine, and reporters spoke about this today to Vice President JD Vance.
Does pausing aid for Ukraine leave Ukraine vulnerable right now and give Russia an advantage?
Look, what the president has said very clearly about our Ukraine policy is that he wants the Ukrainians to come to the negotiating table. We want the Ukrainians to have a sovereign and an independent country. We think the Ukrainian troops have fought very bravely, but we're at a point here where neither Europe nor the United States nor the Ukrainians can continue this war indefinitely. So it's important that everybody come to the table, and the president is trying to send a very explicit message. The Ukrainians have got to come to the table and start negotiating with President Trump.
Do you still have hope for the mineral deal? Do you believe that the mineral deal can still be reached with Ukraine?
Yeah, I certainly do. And I think the president is still committed to the mineral deal. I think we've heard some positive things, but not yet, of course, a signature from our friends in Ukraine. But look, the mineral deal is a really important part of the president's policy. Number one, the American people have got to get some payback for the incredible financial investment we've made in this country. A lot of the aid that the Europeans have sent has come in the form of money that is getting repaid to them. Well, it's really ridiculous and frankly an insult to the American people that the Europeans are getting a better deal than the American people. The president is just trying to assure that the American people get a fair deal while simultaneously ensuring we have access to some minerals and resources that are very important for the economy of the future.
What do you need if Zelensky changes his posture, his focus, his gratefulness, as you guys have talked about, would there be a consideration of bringing the aid back on, or is that an indefinite pause, a long-term pause? Do you see it?
No, look, the president has been very clear. He wants the Ukrainians to come to the negotiating table. I think when the Ukrainians come to the negotiating table, everything is on the table.
What do you need to see from President Zelensky?
Look, I think the most important thing, a lot of people have made this about public statements. President Zelensky needs to say that he's committed to the peace, or President Zelensky needs to apologize to the president. The public stuff doesn't matter nearly as much as what are the Ukrainians doing to meaningfully engage on what a peaceful settlement would look like. We need the Ukrainians privately to come to us and say, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is how we're going to participate in the process to end this conflict. That is the most important thing. And that lack of private engagement is what is most concerning to us.
President Trump said that. A lot of pressure on Ukraine, but not much pressure on Russia. Do you expect to do maybe more sanctions on Russia or any other steps to pressure both sides if you want to have them on a negotiation table?
Well, I don't think that's right, actually. I mean, we still have a number of sanctions that are placed on the Russians. We do believe that the Russians economically are struggling because of this conflict. We do believe that it's in Russia's best interest, but also Ukraine and the United States' best interest to bring this conflict to a close. So we believe in applying pressure to everybody to stop the killing, because that's what the president's policy is, and that's what's in the best interest of the American people.
Vice President JD Vance speaking to reporters in the hallway of a Senate office building. He was there for a hearing of a Pentagon nominee that he calls a friend, Elbridge Colby, for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy number 3 in the Defense Department leadership. President Trump's nominee for U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, was asked about Ukraine policy today at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. Questions coming from Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware.
Are you familiar with the Article 5 provisions of the NATO treaty?
Yes, sir.
And when's it been invoked?
Only once in the history of NATO, and that was to support the United States of America after it was attacked on September 11th.
And our then 29 NATO allies pulled their weight, deployed, served, fought alongside us, died. And I would argue that after Russia's aggressive invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago, they've continued to do the same. In fact, in total, they've delivered more support for Ukraine than we have. Support for refugees, support for their economy, and military support. If you're confirmed as you head over to NATO, I was encouraged to hear you say you view it as a strong and vital alliance and you look forward to strengthening it. Would it strengthen our alliance for us to abandon Ukraine and the uniform view of our NATO allies that defending Ukraine against Russian aggression is in our collective national interest?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator. Obviously, the situation on the battlefield.
Please be brief if you could.
Yeah, the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine is brutal. It's another land war in Europe. We have to.
Does it serve our national interest to abandon Ukraine?
Well, what's in our national interest, obviously, is a broad question. We need.
Mr. Whitaker, I have 3 minutes, not time for broad questions. I'll simply assert, if I might, that from my view, and I think this is broadly shared on this committee, pulling in the same direction is what a team does. Showing up, suiting up, getting in the fight, and pulling in the same direction is what a team with clear-eyed leadership does. And whatever that was last Friday, I hope we can get back on track in a united approach with our vital allies instead of confusing them, dividing them, having a push for greater investment, interoperability, greater lethality of NATO as a united force would be a great mission for you. I am concerned that that is not the direction that recent conversations between President Zelensky and President Trump will lead us.
Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, questioning the nominee for U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, at today's Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. This is Washington Today. Aviation International News writes that aviation leaders stress the urgent need to step up modernization of the nation's ATC system, calling it unsustainable today during a hearing before the U.S. House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's Aviation Subcommittee. But stakeholders and lawmakers alike reemphasized the need to avoid contentious debates around proposals such as privatization, which has been touted recently in some circles in Washington. With the backdrop of recent fatal accidents that have claimed the lives of dozens of people, the Aviation Subcommittee delved into the shortfalls of the system and the slow progress in updating it. That was from Aviation International News. C-SPAN covered this hearing. Congressman Brad Knott, Republican of North Carolina, asked Nick Daniels, president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association Union, about what Daniels says is a $6 billion immediate need to upgrade the systems.
What are things that we can do in terms of air traffic control to assist air traffic control in making these needs known earlier, more urgently, so we don't find ourselves in this predicament going forward?
Congressman, thank you. NACA has been advocating for at least 10 years on the very change that you speak of. Number one, it has to be in the realm of telecommunications. That is a major impediment to the system, and it's a safety risk. Not only that, then it would be the NOTAM system. The NOTAM system that provides information to pilots across the country, that would need to be invested in, corrected, and fixed because, again, it takes down the entire system when it's not up to date. And then get into the controller needs. That's going to be an information display system. Right now, an iPad has 10 times the amount of information than a controller does at our fingertips when we're controlling airplanes. It's antiquated. We're clicking on buttons and quite often not even being able to use it. And then the last one's going to be the investment in our surveillance or our radar, so we have surface awareness and we can be out looking out the windows of the planes instead of spending time looking for information.
Is there a way, in your opinion, sir, to decentralize the bureaucratic mechanism that currently seems to exist? It seems like the air traffic controllers is very centralized, from the training to the equipment requests to procurement requests, whatever it may be. Is there a way to decentralize so that there is more efficiencies within the system?
Sir, I don't know exactly what that answer would be, but I know that being a part of it and ensuring that those monies are going towards the accurate or the actual issues will be key to all of it. And NACA's involvement is that so that a piece of equipment isn't rolled out and then we find out what it is and how it doesn't actually work for us. That continues to be the broken model that exists today. Yep. If somebody buys something, we look at it and say, we can't use that, and then we can start the process all over again. So anything that's an effort to fix that, we absolutely support.
And then my last question, sir, how is air traffic controlling doing with recruiting new members, seeking careers in that field, training them, and then dispersing them to into that career?
Congressman, we agree wholeheartedly with Secretary Duffy that this is the time to recruit the best and brightest, to invest in the people. And that's going to come through working on not only the hiring and the training of those air traffic controllers and incentivizing them into the career field, not just while at Oklahoma City Academy. but the ones who are coming in and then going to live in either a high cost of living area and retaining the air traffic controllers that we have today that are leaving quite often because of the stresses and pressures of 6-day work weeks.
Do you see any value in having more academies besides just the Oklahoma City Academy, or do you like the model of having it just in one place?
Congressman Knack is on record. We support any ability to maximize the throughput of air traffic controllers through a system.
Okay.
Congressman Brad Knott, Republican from North Carolina, questioning Nick Daniels, president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, at today's House Aviation Subcommittee hearing. Reuters writes that the FAA remains about 3,500 fully certified air traffic controllers below targeted staffing levels and has 10% fewer controllers than it did in 2012. And last week, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said the FAA will take immediate steps to boost hiring and wants to address infrastructure woes. Associated Press, writing from Cape Canaveral, Florida, NASA's 2 stuck astronauts are just a few weeks away from finally returning to Earth after 9 months in space. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams have to wait until their replacements arrive at the International Space Station next week before they can check out later this month. They'll be joined on their SpaceX ride home by 2 astronauts who launched by themselves in September alongside 2 empty seats. During a news conference Tuesday, Wilmore said that while politics is part of life, it did not play into his and Williams' return, moved up a couple of weeks thanks to a change in SpaceX capsules. President Donald Trump and SpaceX's Elon Musk said at the end of January that they wanted to accelerate the astronauts' return, blaming the previous administration. That was from the Associated Press article. Here's part of the news conference.
Our first question comes from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Hi, I'm hoping you can hear me. For Butch and Sonny, what's it like to wake up one day in space and find yourself in the center of a political story? I'm referring to the comments a month ago made by President Trump and Elon Musk regarding your return.
Obviously, we've heard some of these different things that have been said. I can tell you at the outset, all of us have the utmost respect for Mr. Musk and obviously respect and admiration for our President of the United States, Donald Trump. We appreciate them. We appreciate all that they do for us, for human spaceflight, for our nation. And we're thankful that they are in the positions they're in. The words they've said, politics, I mean, that's part of life. We understand that. And there's an important reason why we have a political system and the political system that we do have. And we're behind it 100%. We know what we've lived up here. We know the ins and outs and the specifics that they may not be privy to. And I'm sure that they have some issues that they are dealing with, information that they have that we are not privy to. So when I think about your question, that's part of life. We are on board with it. We support our nation. We support our nation's leaders, and we're thankful for them.
Astronaut Butch Wilmore on the International Space Station, floating next to astronauts Sonny Williams and Nick Hague, part of a news conference with reporters on Earth. There's an AFP article that reads, Butch Wilmore's remarks come just days after acting NASA Administrator Janet Petro raised eyebrows by stating the agency aimed to put America first, echoing President Trump's political slogan. Today is Mardi Gras, and in New Orleans, millions of tourists and local residents turned out for the Fat Tuesday holidays parade, music and food, many in costumes and beads of purple, yellow, and green. In Washington, the top 2 members of the U.S. House Republican leadership are from Louisiana. The Majority Leader Steve Scalise brought treats to the morning news conference.
Let me first say happy Mardi Gras, everybody. Today is Mardi Gras Day in my home city of New Orleans. This is a Mardi Gras king cake, which we enjoy to celebrate the day. This is not to torture you. This is to let you know I've gotten this for each of you, so that it's all cut up. I'm going to pass this around. You don't have to write nice stories about me. You can, but this is we like to share our celebration. There'll be about 1 million people from all around the world on the streets of New Orleans celebrating with the crew of Zulu, the crew of Rex, riding, and it's a great family event. My parents took me to Mardi Gras parades when I was a kid, and we take our kids now and pass that tradition on. I am so glad to be with all of you today, but I wish I was in New Orleans celebrating Mardi Gras. But here, put your cameras down for a minute, take a piece, pass it around. If you get the baby, the tradition is there's a plastic baby in one of the slices. That means you have to throw the next king cake party. So we'll let you know where to get the cake, and you'll want more, believe me.
House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, at the morning news conference with other House Republicans. The Speaker of the House, also there, Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana. He said if he had forethought, he would have brought beads to throw at the reporters so they could get the whole Mardi Gras experience. It's not just New Orleans that turns out for Mardi Gras. It's big in Mobile, Alabama. And that led to these dueling videos from Alabama Governor Jay Ivey and Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry.
Governor Landry, I know you're getting ready to celebrate Mardi Gras over in Louisiana, but before you get too carried away, I wanted to send you a little reminder from Alabama, of course, about where the original party really started. Thanks to a great recommendation from my friend Mobile Mayor Sandy Stimson, I had a king cake sent your way straight from Pullman's Bake Shop. So check your mailbox. Have fun celebrating today and let the good times roll the Alabama way.
Hello, Louisiana. Happy Mardi Gras. Just wanted y'all to know that the governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, she loves us so much, she sent us this beautiful king cake. We're going to be sending her a king cake from the great state of Louisiana, because this is where king cakes come from. And by the way, Kay, we want to thank you for this king cake, and we look forward to seeing Auburn and Alabama on the football field this year.
Governor Jeff Landry, and before that, Governor Kay Ivey, posting those videos today. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.